So, Liz, you were up in my corner of the world in the Berkshire Hills this weekend.
I was with my amazing camp friends who are really excited to be mentioned in the cold open.
Well, here they are.
Here they are.
I had a funny feel. Do you want to drop their names?
I'll shout out all their names. So
Have at it.
Andrea, Cynthia, Christine, Teen, Colleen, Deirdre, me, and Lori.
I feel like it's the intro to the Mouseketeers or something.
It was great.
Okay, good. You had a good time?
We had an amazing time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
And they loved all your recommendations. We had delicious pizza at Bohema.
Bohema, yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
This is in Lenox, Massachusetts, in case anyone's up in the Berkshire Hills. Just email me anytime at chatedu@edadvance, and I'll give you, tourism recommendations. Did you notice as you drive around, it's cool this time of year, the Christmas decorations are down, but there's like in the shops, and I noticed in some people's houses, not as much as Christmas, there's a new decoration that's out front of their houses in the spirit of February. Did you notice anything?
The spirit of February.
Mm-hmm.
No, there were a lot of white twinkling lights. That's what I noticed.
No.
Hearts?
Hearts, exactly.
Okay, yeah, there's some hearts around.
Right, because it's Valentine's Day.
It is.
If folks have listened to the podcast from the very beginning and they had to rate Dr. Elizabeth Rade on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of your romantic inclinations, what do you think they would score you?
Oh, well, if they know the story of how I wouldn't even answer Adam, I'm pretty low on that scale.
Okay. I didn't want to say that. I wanted the Chat EDU listeners so via you make that assessment. I agree. I don't know that either of us are like killing it on the romantic front, but if you're a 4, I'm a 6, and if I'm a 6, you're a 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
you are better than me. I definitely give you that.
But it's not a competition. Neither of us are going to win a gold prize.
No.
So Barbara Sri Lanka, who has this amazing AI advisory boards blog, we reference it often because she's so good at curating content. She had this really neat post about a prompt called the Feynman technique. And you were actually familiar with that. Do you want to, let us know what's the Feynman technique all about?
So it's a 4-step method for mastering a concept. So the first step is learn it. So you study the topic. The second step is that you teach it. So you explain it in simple terms. The third step is you identify gaps, so what don't you understand? And then you really simplify it, refine it, use analogies. If you can't explain it simply, then you don't fully understand it.
Yeah, so she posted essentially her post on Feynman's technique was a prompt. And lots of folks are doing this. You have an interesting strategy for learning or exploration or research. It's like, how do you craft a prompt that gets really into the heart of that technique? Because the large language models, they're familiar with the Feynman technique. So if you just do some organization around the prompt, you'll be in good shape. So I thought we'd try this together.
Okay. What are we testing ourselves on?
Valentine's Day romance. And so I'm going to take this little prompt. I'm going to go over to ye old ChatGPT.
All right. So you want me to do the same thing?
Well, I'll take care of this. You just kind of...
Okay. I'm going to give you some answers.
Yeah, give me some answers. So when we think about Valentine's Day romance, Liz, what have you read or watched? Hallmark cards or Christmas movies? What do you think?
I've probably watched... a dozen Hallmark movies and romantic comedies.
Okay.
Not a big movie watcher. But I've read a lot of books.
Okay, well, let's get to that for a second. So watch a dozen Hallmark movies. Christmas movies, what do we got?
I don't know. Christmas movies.
What's your big takeaway from those? Is there a theme or a way the plot just typically plays out?
It's all boy meets girl, girl meets boy. Something goes wrong, something goes weird, and then they... fall in love.
I can feel the depth of your romance here. No, those Christmas movies are like hunky guy in Pennsylvania,
Can you hear the eye roll? It's so not my jam.
It's great. Woman from the city goes out to the country and there's a snowstorm. All right, fine. So Hallmark movies.
Okay, but I'm much better with books.
Okay, so let's talk about what have you read?
Okay, so books by Abby Jimenez.
Okay, hang on. And I've read books by Abby Jimenez. Tell us more there.
And Emily Henry.
And Emily Henry, 2 people I've never heard of. Tell me about these books.
They are kind of chick lit, romance, meet cute, lots of meet cutes.
You're getting more enthusiastic here.
Because I prefer to read books much more than I like to read movies.
Chick lit, meet cute. I don't think I've ever said those 2 things in my life.
You probably haven't read a lot of chick lit.
All right, so give us a little flavor on chick lit. Chick lit and meet cute, Dr. Rade.
It is that girl comes to a small town and meets the local guy, or 2 people end up on vacation that hate each other, and then through their whatever interactions they fall in love.
How many hours would you say? So let me just finish this. Two people don't like each other. They meet and they fall in love despite their odds.
Yes.
Okay. And how many hours?
Of book reading?
Yeah, the whole thing.
Say 60 hours.
Okay. So it's now got all the context of your information. It's going to use the Feynman technique or the Feynman method. It's really a method.
It's a method.
Yeah, the Feynman method in order to help you kind of make sure that you're ready for Valentine's Day. Adam, you're going to have a whole new wife here. All right, so let's see. What do we got? All right, great approach. The Feynman method is all about explaining concepts in simple terms, identifying gaps, and refining understanding. I'll ask 10 questions, each designed to test clarity and challenge your assumptions to push you into deeper thought. Since you've got about 60 hours of learning in both about Valentine's Day romance and the romance genre in general, I'd say you're at an intermediate level. You likely understand themes, tropes, narrative structures, et cetera, et cetera. Let's begin. I'm going to jump to question 5, Liz. How does the meet cute function in the structure of a romance story?
That is what sets up the whole conflict and then bringing them together.
Liz, we're just going to do one more question here. We don't have time for all 10, but question 8, what makes a romantic resolution so satisfying to the audience?
Because it's the happily ever after. It's everyone's fairy tale. It's all about that happily ever after.
All right, Liz, so we popped those in. We didn't get to do all of them, but let's see what we get back. All right, so great. Based on your responses, you've got a strong intuitive grasp of the romance structure, but there are places where we can push more depth for clarity. Here's some feedback as we continue. So on each one of these questions now, it's giving you quick feedback on your answers. For instance, let's go to question 5, meet cute. Sets up conflict and brings them together. That's true, but does every romance need meet cute? What happens when there isn't meet cute? Or finally, let's go to the last question, which was about satisfying resolution. And you said, because it's a happily ever after, it's everyone's fairy tale. What makes a strong HEA versus a weak one? What the hell's an HEA? I don't know. Do all satisfying endings have to be...
Oh, happily ever after.
Nice. Right?
Got it.
Do you feel the depth of your learning happening here as Feynman and you engage around romantic love and books and movies?
I do. It's kind of fun.
Okay, awesome. All right, so listen, for all the folks out there in Chat EDU land, whatever your status is, if you want to kind of dig into Feynman's method, we'll put the prompt into the show notes. And you can, like Liz, have a wonderful romantic Valentine's Day. We're a little early, Liz. We are recording only on February 3rd. But you know what? I wish you and Adam the most happy Valentine's Day. And I think, based on Feynman's work here and you, this may be the best ever.
You're setting up a lot of pressure. But I also wish the same for you and Michelle.
Thank you.
But Matt.
Yes.
We have our own anniversary.
Oh, my God, that's right.
And I texted you over the weekend and did not get the enthusiasm I was hoping from my podcast partner. But despite your lack of enthusiasm over our anniversary, it is our 1-year podcast anniversary. February 1st was when we dropped our first episode. And in that vein, I have written you a poem.
Oh, no. Did you write me a poem or did Chat?
Don't worry about who wrote the poem. It is a poem for you,
I'm romantically
my dear
ready.
co-host partner.
Let's hear it.
This is called A Podcasting Ode to Matt.
Oh.
A year ago, we took the leap with zero clue, yet dreams so deep. Mics in hand, AI on screen. Somehow we made this podcast scene. From awkward starts and tech delays to Are We Live and What'd You Say? 44 episodes, who would have guessed, aside from my mom who liked us best. Through glitchy feeds and editing woes, your dad jokes land, my eye roll shows. Yet somehow, Matt, we've found our groove with insight sharp and banter smooth. If Ethan Mollick were paid per mention, he'd fund AI without convention. And Jonathan, our expert guide, from the microphone, he's never shied. We've had a few guests, and that's just fine, but we talk to dead folks all the time. Dr. Seuss dropped rhymes, Rockefeller flexed, and ChatGPT just roasted me over text. So here's to us, 1 year is done, 44 episodes, all AI fun. 1 year down, the road ahead, more laughs, more takes, and AI dread. So let's keep talking week by week, making sense of AI's mystique. To Chat EDU and to you, my friend, the podcast ride, may it never end.
I'm literally about to cry. Thanks, Dr. Rade. Oh, thank you. That's really awesome. I said to Michelle and my kids this morning when I was heading out, I was like, I love going to work on Mondays. I'm not sure I've said that across my life, but this really is a truly special
So
thing.
much fun.
Yeah. So thanks, everybody, for letting us indulge our own enjoyment of the work that we're doing here. And thanks to all of you for spending a year with us. Many of you have right from the very beginning. And if you're just catching up, you're either like, these people are crazy, or this sounds good. Let's keep listening.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Doc.
You're welcome.
I'm Matt Mervis.
And I'm Liz Radday.
And this is Chat EDU, a year in, a podcast about AI in K-12 education. In today's episode, No Copyright for AI, the line between AI help and human work, will explore how a new ruling from the U.S. Copyright Office sheds light on how we understand AI and maybe even what is authentic student work.
But first, in the news, we'll explore my favorite topic, which is the interaction between AI and project-based learning, and this time with a dose of Harvard in the mix.
Ooh, Harvard.
Harvard, as you would say. Then we'll look at 3 new innovative AI startups that showcase the power and potential of generative AI going well beyond student tutoring systems we hear so much about. And finally, we'll go beneath the surface to explore what copyright can tell us about unique human creation and where to find that elusive line between human and machine. And of course, we'll end with our short stack chat back.
All right, Liz, so as you said, we're diving into project-based learning and AI, a topic that you care a lot about. I'm sure it's going to be one of the themes in your upcoming book with ASCD. But as you said, this time we have a dose of Harvard Graduate School. So far it's been Matt and Liz's wandering musing, although you are soon to be ASCD published author. But it was neat to see the kind of stamp of, I don't know if it's approval or just deep research from the folks at Harvard. So they put out a guide essentially called Generative AI in Student-Directed Projects by Karen Brennan and a whole bunch of other folks. I think Liz actually has reached out to this team just to connect, because most of this work, right, was set in the higher ed world, but we are deeply involved in this work here in K-12, or at least for middle and high school. So this explores how AI can help students navigate self-directed learning, which, Liz, I believe is your wheelhouse in the world of PIP and Capstone.
It is. I work with students on open-ended projects all the time. It has been my passion for the last almost decade. They have some common challenges. One is figuring out where to start, so that whole ideation process is difficult, how to structure their work, so that's the time management piece, and then how to refine their ideas. The guide nails all of that, and that AI isn't a replacement for thinking. I've said it over and over again, but it can really be a useful scaffold when it's used strategically.
Yeah, they kind of tap into this whole idea of what Professor Malik would call a co-intelligence, or I've called cognitive onboarding. Right? Loving that phrase.
Love it.
Or a second brain. One of the big takeaways is that AI should support thinking, not replace it. And we found that project-based learning is a really rich and fertile ground to practice that, right? Because you're often doing a complex multi-step process that feels similar to how folks are using AI in their professional lives. One of the students at the report said, I think it can be a second brain for you if you're feeling a little stuck. You can ask it to help you get started, but it can't do everything for you. You're still the pilot, and it's just an assistant.
I love that metaphor. It's so true. I see capstone students all the time who either over-rely on AI and let the AI be too much of the director, or avoid it completely and then are missing some great opportunities. The best approach is somewhere in the middle. Let AI help you move things forward, but don't let it take over the whole process.
Yeah, I mean, one of the students also said, speaking right to that, where's the line, and is it doing the work for you or is it an assistant? You know, really think of what you want out of this moment. Do you just want to get the job done, or do you want to learn? It reminds me of that quote from Region 16, for the love of the brain. Yeah. It's my sense, as we've watched so many kids do these projects, that more often than not, they do want to actually do the learning. That's one of the beauties of a project that's rooted in a student's interest. It's something they care about, and these projects tend to kind of hook kids and get them involved. So there's a number of different ways that the report talks about more specifically the role. One is in idea generation. I like how they put this, structuring the chaos. I'd love to ask Gary Robinson, our school coach, if sometimes when he walks into a class of kids that are just starting on PIP, does it feel like structuring the chaos? And I think it does. The guide highlights 2 ways that students are using AI to organize their thinking. I mean, first you have this kind of brainstorming with AI, using AI as a conversational partner to develop ideas. and then structuring the chaos, which is more about taking these big ideas and breaking them into more manageable steps. There was an example from the guy where a student's working on a museum exhibit for middle school girls learning astrophysics, and they used AI to create a week-by-week plan.
Yeah, this is exactly the kind of planning we want all of our capstone and PIP students to do. Students have these huge, exciting ideas and don't know how to break them down into actual steps. And so that is part of the frustration is like, okay, I'm learning something brand new. I don't know what all the steps are or how long it will take them. But AI might be really able to help them do that, break it down into the steps.
So let's get closer to the ground. Like, what does this really look like?
Yeah, so AI will generate a great plan for you and it'll break it down into steps. But when we think about high school students, like especially juniors and seniors who are doing these bigger capstone projects, they have a lot of other things to consider. Students that are applying early to college usually have an early to mid-November deadline. So that's a really crazy time. Maybe that's not the best time to have to do X, Y, or Z. Or this week I have 3 away games that I'm going to get home at 9 o'clock. So maybe I don't have a lot. But next week we actually have a day off for whatever holiday and, practice is canceled one of those days. So I have more time. So you always have to kind of tweak the AI plan because it's going to assume, if you don't tell it, it's just going to assume that each week is the same. So you've got to definitely tweak it. Students get off track because something unexpected happens. That I always talk about the time management plan as a Google Doc, not a PDF. So you can go in there and change it. Kids do get frustrated when they fall off track, especially when they fall behind. They sort of want to throw up their hands and say, well, it's never going to be done. Use AI to help you either get back on track or tweak what your end goal is or whatever that may be. But it's such a helpful thought partner.
I just had this little fantasy. So, we've talked more and more about agentic AI and AI vision when an AI system, like let's say you're in a whole Google Gemini environment and a student's got that doc. They have that Google Doc that has their timeline. None of the kids in my house have ever used their Google Calendar. Right? It's like email is like probably not going to use that. Google Calendar is like, I'm never, ever going to use that, which is weird because ultimately it's a skill that they're going to need. Nonetheless, in my fantasy land, the student has their Google Calendar pretty well fleshed out, including, like, as you just said, their away games or there's a half-day PD where they've got a block of time. And agentically, the AI is able to look at their timeline, look at their calendar, and kind of proactively prompt them around. I don't know, maybe that's giving too much agency to the AI. And plus, my fantasy is completely, destroyed because
it would require kids using all of those tools.
If you have a child at home that uses Google Calendar,
let us know.
Yeah, because we need to profile them as an exemplary. All right, let's talk about scope creep. That's another really interesting place that Harvard thought about how and explored and examined with students the role that AI might play. So another big challenge that we see students face, and they did in this higher ed setting, is a scope creep. So they're doing too much. They're kind of the project's getting away from them, right? So a student might say, they feel like it's getting too big. How would you scale this back, but still kind of make sure that these key elements and my main goals are achieved? It's a student reflection. And I think that's a great example.
Yeah, scope is one of my 4 pillars that I talk about in all projects.
Oh, you have 4 pillars?
I do.
What are the 4 pillars?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that.
Should we put it into the Feynman method?
We could, but I'm just going to tell you my 4 pillars.
Okay.
So scope, feasibility,
Yep.
interest, and learning stretch.
Nice.
So for a project to be successful in what I've seen over the last 10 years, the scope has to be appropriate. The project has to be feasible.
Yep.
The student has to have authentic interest in it. And it's got to be a learning stretch. It can't be something they already can do. Scope and feasibility go hand in hand, but it's one of the things that is often most challenging for kids because 9 times out of 10, their project scope is too big. They get really excited and they want to create the next Uber. They want to create an entire new app that's going to solve mental health crises in teens. And we love that enthusiasm and energy. But then we go, okay, but you have a semester, or okay, you have 12 weeks. You're not going to create the next Uber in 12 weeks. You're not going to code an entire app.
Right.
So then helping them figure out, so what is the scope? What is the most important part of this? Is it that you want to be coding something, or is it that you want to be addressing mental health? The example we often use is with a student doing a compost bin, and what she wanted to solve climate crisis. So what was the most important parts of that puzzle to her? And to her, building that compost bin was really important, much less important than the education around climate change. And so she ended up really zooming in on building a wooden box.
Perfect
and it was
example.
really important for her to be doing it with sustainable materials.
Yep.
And so she used reclaimed pallets. And at the end, her pride in being able to rip apart those pallets and use power tools to put them back together was more important to her than really whether or not the compost bin actually succeeds. Like the putting together of that bin was huge.
Yeah, I share her videos, some videos from her project all the time. She's just, I'd love to know where that student is. She's probably a junior in college now, I would think.
Probably.
Yeah.
I think ultimately students should be able to describe their project in 2 sentences. Can you tell me exactly what you want to do for this project and what is the most important pieces of that so that you can really dive into that with the scope?
Yeah, I like it. Another area that the report highlights in these self-directed projects is this reflection tool, again, that second brain. So the what, so what, now what, right? The guide highlights that AI can be a reflection tool, helping students think about the problems in kind of where they are in the process. And so 2 strategies stand out. The what, so what, now what, AI challenging students to refine their problems, and devil's advocate, AI presenting counter arguments to force deeper and critical thinking, which we love. I think in our prompts library, we have a number of examples, mostly for teachers and school leaders, about how AI is this great kind of thought partner taking on the devil's advocate role.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what Gary does when he goes into schools and plays that devil's advocate role. But if you could do it with AI, you can do it more frequently, and it kind of lets the students practice that skill on their own.
Yeah, I like it. So Liz, one quick thing, and then I'd love to get your closing thoughts. AP Capstone's been really interesting. So as we've worked in schools doing personal interest projects, and now we very formally, if you're new to the podcast, let me just say a little bit more carefully, we have platforms, curriculum platforms, well, both curriculum and platform, and they roll up into a student portfolio for personal interest projects and capstone projects. They kind of help walk students through the process. But over the last year and a half, we've been piloting a little bot called Sidekick, which is with the student through each phase of the project. So if they're doing an ideation activity, there's a Sidekick bot there for them. If they're working the script on their video, for their video trailer for their project, there's a Sidekick bot. If they're working on their timeline, et cetera, et cetera. These are all tend to be things that students either learn, solve, make, or do. They're making stuff. They are not writing a research paper. And I just want to bring that in as a foil because AI got really interesting this week when it comes to the research component.
Yeah.
So can you just quickly explain, in the world of AP Capstone, what's the deliverable there?
So AP Capstone is actually a series of 2 courses.
Okay.
So it's AP Seminar and AP Research. So AP Seminar students, we're typically seeing them take junior year, and then AP Research they take senior year. And then if you take both of them, it's called AP Capstone. Definitely in AP Research, the final product is it is almost the equivalent of a master's level thesis.
Okay.
Students are asking a question. They have to use peer-reviewed articles. They have to use this is deep research, and the end product is very much a formal paper. AP Seminar is pretty similar, but they are doing more work in groups and, again, doing a lot of research on topics, but it is heavily based on text and word production rather than like a physical product.
Okay, so our style of capstone, where kids are learning, solving, making, or doing, there's usually a prototype or an event or a deliverable, a little bit different. Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you use the phrase deep research. And I just want to point this out. I'm going to pose a problem, don't have an answer.
Okay.
It's my favorite thing to do. Many months ago, we did a podcast episode, one of my favorite titles, called A Storm Rolled In, which was about this Stanford University. It was essentially an agentic bot, right? So it was a bot that crawled the internet, found all sorts of great citations, and then wrote essentially, like you said, maybe the first chapter of a master's thesis. And if you listen to that episode, you will recall that actually I think we did this two times. We took Liz's doctoral dissertation topic and the motivating rationale for her paper, for your paper, and it wrote essentially the first chapter.
In about 2 minutes.
Right, exactly.
Months of research.
Right. So you think about this 2-year sequence of AP. When you look at A Storm Rolled In, AP Capstone, when you look at A Storm Rolled In, you go, that's interesting. In 3 minutes, a tool came through and did high-level, high-quality research. Looks very much like the kind of output that you might see in an AP Capstone course, and no hallucinations or little hallucinations.
Yeah.
All right, so Google's Gemini, when they upgraded Gemini maybe 2 weeks ago, they introduced a feature called Deep Research. And so deep research was very much like Storm. Again, it was an AI agent. It's not quite the way we're starting to understand agents in the Matthew McConaughey example.
Commercial,
Yeah,
yep.
everybody's been asking me about that. No, you haven't seen the Matthew McConaughey. I don't watch enough sports ball, apparently. But
Yes, but I shared it with you, and now you've seen it.
I know it was awesome. By the way, it's a great. Maybe this week I'll remember to put it in the show notes. So, but this is a little bit different kind of an agent. It's out there. It's crawling the web. It's finding the resources. It's vetting them. Storm was really cool, as you might recall. It took on the role of 4 different personas, and you could watch the chat interaction with the content. I mean, it's really, even if you're just doing research, it's such a cool and interesting example. Now, over the weekend, the good folks at OpenAI, the ChatGPT team, also introduced a tool coincidentally named Deep Research. I guess they decided that it was generic enough of a term that they and Google could have the same exact title for pretty much the same exact function.
They didn't want to name it like O4
No.
Preview Mini.
I love it. No, just Deep Research, but good point. So if you teach AP Capstone, I mean, you're going to have to think about that. Professor Malik wrote about this a little bit in a recent post over the weekend saying, if you really care about research as a skill, you're probably going to need to do it as a supervised, guided piece of instruction and assessment in the classroom, and then think about some kind of a flipped classroom model, because the ability of these systems to basically do that thing in minutes in a high quality level has to make you really think about that deliverable. So it's just a challenge, right? I mean, personally, I'm a little biased. I think the way we do Capstone is the way everyone should do Capstone. But if in your world Capstone involves a deep academic research paper, go look at either Storm, Deep Research for Gemini, or Deep Research from OpenAI, and think critically about what is it, how does it help inform the work that you're trying to do.
What Storm can do and what Gemini can do and OpenAI can do is they can really just lay the groundwork, because research isn't just bringing together all those resources. It really does write chapter 1. If you're really doing research, there's some sort of experiment that you're doing or some sort of new thing that's coming out of it. So really what Storm did was wrote chapter 1 of my dissertation, which if it could have taken all of that research on self-efficacy and done it in a week versus me taking months, and then, you want your dissertation to be done in a reasonable amount of time. But what it couldn't do was the bulk of my dissertation, which was interviewing kids, watching them, observing them. And so I think the same is true in AP research. There must be some sort of experiment that they do or question that they're asking that isn't answered.
Let's hope so.
If what you want, I mean, I remember in college writing papers that weren't research. They were just big, long reports about the role of women in the French Revolution, and I had to go take out books from the library and read about the role of women in French Revolution. Like that sort of paper is not going to be as valid. But if you're actually doing research where you're coming up with something new, then that's what AI can't do yet.
It's such a perfect setup for the conversation we're going to have about the Copyright Office's ruling. But I love that. Yes. Your example, if you didn't hear that episode, go listen, because and we did a second episode, which is about how AI can help do research personas. But the coolest part of Liz is, in my opinion, of your doctoral, I almost called it your master's thesis.
Well,
You got to take back your anniversary poem to her doctoral dissertation. Dr. Rade's was the research, was working with the kids, with the engagement around the students, with the findings around that. So yeah, maybe that's the challenge, right? Deep research, great. It will do that piece. But if you're doing Capstone, where's the human element that's so novel and interesting that an AI chatbot's not going to crawl the web to do it?
Right. I'd love it to do the research part. You need that information, but it's also not the fun part.
It is not the fun part. Cool. All right. Well, that is our little take on the work that Harvard's doing. And we will look forward to carrying on this conversation about the role that AI plays in project-based learning. Yeah, the very final word on this topic, by the way, is Dr. Elizabeth Rade, because she did a doctoral dissertation, was just published in Educational Leadership. Is that right, Liz?
Yes. The February issue is all about AI in schools, and I have an article in there about project-based learning and AI, and it really kind of walks through a lot of this.
Fantastic. So if you're not currently subscribed to Educational Leadership, get that credit card out, because you need it so you can go read Dr. Rade's latest article, or just email her at chatedu@edadvance.org, and maybe she'll, send you a behind the scenes copy.
Sure can.
No, she wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do that to the good people at Educational Leadership. All right, so Liz, as you said in the lead-in, we're going to look at 3 new startups. These are all featured by Google. There's a little Google self-promotion going on here because there's some tools that Google has supported. But they are 3 new, roughly like AI and education startups. They all have an educational function. But I want to feature the story because they're novel and interesting, and they go beyond the kind of bot buffet and show us the power of AI in more substantial ways, whether it's vision or video or VR, which all 3 of these kind of hit at. All right, so we're looking at these cutting-edge AI startups. They are in Google's Growth Academy, and the title is AI for Education Program. This initiative supports startups using AI to personalize learning, improve accessibility, or enhance educational outcomes.
Yeah, so we're going to look at 3. They are called SignLab, JotIt, and MoonHub. And so they each are tackling completely different learning challenges. So one is making sign language more accessible. Another is bringing handwriting into the digital world. And the third is using AI and VR to revolutionize workplace training.
Cool. So let's start with SignLab from Norway. They're solving this kind of huge accessibility gap, which is super interesting. 90% of deaf children are born to hearing parents, but only 20% of families regularly use sign language. And that's often become a kind of gap, and sometimes it's an expensive or hard for folks to access those skills.
Yeah, so that's where AI comes in. SignLab built a digital learning platform powered by Google's LearnLM and isolated sign language recognition to make sign language learning more interactive and affordable.
Right. And these aren't just static videos showing how American Sign Language or sign language works. It actually analyzes your signing and gives time real feedback on body shapes, hand shapes, spatial representation, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game changer. Learning sign language is hard. And if you could, instead of just watching videos, you can practice it in front of your phone's camera and get AI feedback on whether you're doing it correctly, that's going to be really helpful.
I've tried this actually during a board presentation I was doing. We've played around a little bit with OpenAI's ChatGPT Advanced Voice Mode. So in Advanced Voice Mode now, if you have the paid subscription, maybe even free, but it would time out quickly, there's a little video camera icon. I think we've done it with you doing like YMCA, and it gave us feedback. So I was in a board meeting and someone, was proficient in sign language. So I pointed the camera at her and I had Advanced Voice Mode going, and I asked her to sign and then have it use the AI video to tell me what she said. I do that a lot with language translation just in voice.
Right.
I was like, how cool would this be with voice and video where it can see someone signing and get the feedback? I'm sorry to report that it was horrible. She's like, that's not even close. But I think that delta will close really, really quickly.
Right, especially if there's a product that is focusing exclusively on that task.
Yeah, and in general, right? I mean, we've sort of found that these narrow models that train specifically on stuff, as the bigger models get better, it's just going to do really well with that. But it's a perfect example of how AI, voice and vision, or in this case, vision, can be leveraged to give real-time feedback, right?
Yeah.
So a little bit beyond, I'm just keep saying beyond the bot buffet. All right, so what's next? We've got JotIt, right? This is a startup from Israel, and they're tackling a topic that I find fascinating because it's one of the least developed skills at my ripe old age of 55, which is handwriting, Liz. So what's this one about?
This is interesting because even though we live on screens, research shows that handwriting is still critical for comprehension, retention, and creativity. But after COVID, a lot of traditional handwriting activities disappeared from classrooms. We're in a state that doesn't teach cursive writing anymore, but this is bringing handwriting back.
Coming back, handwriting. Yeah, so JotIt's bringing handwriting back, but with this AI-powered twist. The platform's built on Google's cloud and Vertex AI. And students, if I get this to kind of write by hand on the tablet, then the AI then converts that into digital text, and then it uses machine learning to do an analysis and to give feedback, especially around doing things. I know you'll talk about this in terms of mathematics. So it turns those notes into structured study guides and can collaborate in real time with students to work on their handwriting. I actually literally at my ripe old age could use this product.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I had a great time last week at the CCLM conference, which is the Connecticut Council of Leaders of Mathematics. And we talked a lot about the importance of handwriting in math. Like, you can start teaching kids to type really young. They can start using voice models really young. But mathematics, still at this time needs to be done on paper.
Sure.
You need to
Show your work.
show your work, and it's not easy to type it because there are so many symbols and figures, and you're drawing triangles or you're solving an equation, and it is not easy to model keeping a balanced equation. The same is true in chemistry and physics. It's not easy to model that on the computer the way we type now. Being able to really leverage the camera to do math and do higher level physics and chemistry is going to be really important.
Yeah, those are great points. I mean, we think of this often as like the elementary school cursive writing skill, but right, it shows up in all sorts of ways. I think it also shows up in creativity, in, the ability that the way that you write, the way that your writing kind of interacts with stuff that you might draw. There's been lots of studies about retention in handwriting.
Right.
So I don't think, people often scoff like, oh, handwriting, who needs it? But in reality, it's a skill. And it is, I think to their point, it's a skill that we lost a little bit during COVID. So I love the idea that AI can bring this back. All right, then finally, we've got this thing called MoonHub. These are great names, by the way.
Yeah.
So we have MoonHub. This is an AI-powered virtual reality tool for mostly workplace training. Now, a couple episodes ago, we talked a little bit about the role of VR and AI, where rather than typing something in and getting an image as a response or a 3D model or text, we're getting to the place where you could type like a workplace scenario and create an immersive environment to learn that skill. It's like on-demand VR training, and that's what the folks at MoonHub in London, they're kind of taking AI out of the classroom and into the workplace using AI-powered virtual reality to make learning more immersive and more memorable.
Yeah, and this is solving a huge problem because most traditional corporate training just doesn't stick. Studies show that employees forget 70% of what they learned within a day, and 90% of the information is lost within a month. And I think part of that, as I'm thinking about it, like if you don't implement that skill right away, you're not going to remember it. Just last week, we fixed something on my computer for recording, and then this week the same thing happened, and I was like, oh, gotta go figure it out again. And it took me a couple of minutes to just click around. Like, there's an easy way to do it, but I still don't know what it is. I just click until it happens.
I feel the automaticity coming, though, for week 3 when it happens again. But thank you, Justin Pascoe, who's, off at his graduate level program, but he's always ready to help jump in there. Yeah, so, this is AI-driven training. They've done a bunch of other stuff. So it's gamified, it's interactive, it tests folks on these real-world skills and applications. They use generative AI for feedback. We're still doing, like, we used to have a bunch of National Science Foundation grants around XR, extended reality. And from that, we've done a bunch of VR work. It's a really neat application. Actually, I was just working with a colleague on this last week called Body Swaps. So you're working on like interview skills, but the AI model is actually looking at your eye contact and your body language, and it's using AI to give you really nice feedback. So this is a really strong opportunity.
Yeah, I've tried body swaps with you before, and it is cool. It is analyzing your whole body position, where your hands are. But, in MoonHubs, instead of sitting through a lecture, you could actually put on a VR headset and practice handling a real-life scenario. If you're a nurse, you could simulate an emergency room response that you have to deal with. Or if in sales, you could practice a high-stakes negotiation. And AI would analyze your decisions and offer coaching versus just like listening to someone tell you how to do it.
Yeah, I love it. All right, so we'll bring this one home. But I think the big takeaway for me here, and I know for you as well, Liz, is that this is the application of AI in novel and interesting ways. Bit of a broken record, but this whole, beyond, I think, what is my current title of this keynote? It's like Beyond the Bot Buffet, the V's will lead the way. And so the V's are voice, vision, VR, and video. And what I love is that these 3 startups, none of these are about like a bot to do multiple choice questions, to do adaptive learning for you, right? So they're basically using video. They're using AI vision, like in the sign language example. They're using all sorts of cool machine learning. And in this case, in MoonHub, they're using VR. So we'll keep profiling these kinds of startups and these kinds of innovations because I think it's important that we all see around the corner on this one because these tools are really, and who knows what's next, but we know that this is like next year and the year after stuff. And when they start showing up in meaningful ways that are data privacy compliant in schools, I think there's an opportunity to go well beyond where we currently are.
I love it. So exciting.
Hey there, I'm Cameron Audia, the executive producer of Chat EDU. If you're a regular listener, you know that Matt and Liz talk a lot about helping students build critical thinking skills in the generative AI age. A related challenge is helping students navigate social media in a way that promotes a balanced life online and offline. That's where the social balance comes in. Developed by Skills 21, it's designed to build social media literacy and give students the tools to think critically about the role social media plays in their lives. If you'd like to learn more, visit skills21.org/social. And if you want to chat in real time about it, email me at chatedu@edadvance.org. I wrote the curriculum and support schools in their implementation of the social balance.
All right, Matt, now let's get beneath the surface and talk about AI, copyright, and the fight over authorship.
Liz, would you think I'm weird when I told you that I saw this story come out about the Copyright Office? I'm like, oh, this is interesting.
Our lives have become a little strange.
And it's not like we don't geek out on copyright, but in reality, the Copyright Office is struggling with the same thing that teachers are and educators and school leaders are, which is what is authentically human. We talked about it a couple stories back, even on this podcast today. All right, so the U.S. Copyright Office just released a second of 3 major reports called Copyright and Artificial Intelligence Part 2, Copyrightability. Just rolls off the tongue. It's posted in the Copyright Office website and lays exactly where the law stands today. And this is tricky, right? Because this is moving so fast, but this is the current state of affairs.
Okay, and the bottom line is AI alone can't be an author. If AI is making the creative choices, there's no copyright protection, which means no ownership, no exclusive rights, and no legal claim to the work.
Okay, great. So if you just prompt the bot and the bot makes a pretty picture, not copyrightable.
Not copyrightable by the person that prompted it.
Yep.
And not copyrightable by, say, OpenAI.
Okay, gotcha.
Right?
All right. Yep. So the report is part of an ongoing effort by the Copyright Office, led by the Register of Copyrights, which is Shira Perlmutter. And this is to address the legal and creative challenges posed by AI. They aren't just offering opinions, they're making policy recommendations that could define the future, right? So there's actual real case law going on in real time here.
Yeah, that's a huge deal because we are seeing AI generate art and books and music and business reports. And the Copyright Office is now saying that if a human isn't truly in control of the creative process, none of it qualifies for protection.
Okay, right. And it's not just speculation. They have already denied multiple copyright claims on AI-generated works. This new report lays out exactly where the line is between human authorship and AI output.
Yes.
Right. So the biggest takeaway from the report is that the human's role in the creative process is everything, right? The Copyright Office spells it out. They say the use of AI tools to assist rather than stand in for human creativity does not affect the availability of copyright protection for the output.
Yeah, this is a lot of words, but that's a key distinction. AI can be a tool, but it can't replace human authorship. So you have to be doing something beyond just prompting and clicking generate.
Right. So why did this story jump out for us? Because this is essentially the same thing that we're thinking about in schools.
Yep.
So for example, if a student brainstorms with AI but then writes the essay themselves, it's, some folks would debate this, but it's generally their work. If they use AI to generate the essay and they just tweak a couple words, it's generally thought to be not their work. So the key question in both cases is who is actually making the expressive choices? And this reminds me of the motion rejected story that we covered from Hingham, Massachusetts, because the teacher said you can use AI to do a little research and outline your work, but you can't do it to write. The student used it to write, including a citation from, what was that famous author?
Jane Doe.
Jane Doe.
Yes,
Right. Yeah,
The
that might have been a
famous Jane
clue that the kid used AI.
And just like with copyright, it's not about whether AI was used, it's about how much human effort, originality, and judgment went into the final product.
So this is where it's going to get a little weird. What doesn't count? And it's kind of about the prompts, right? So one of the most important parts of the report is that just prompting AI isn't enough. Prompts alone do not provide sufficient control to establish human authorship. I'm going to take just a little bird walk here.
Okay.
There are prompts that you look at, and the prompt is so sophisticated and complex and interesting. We've been working on some special ed prompting. Our colleague Jody Minotti has written some prompts. We're kind of working very carefully with some lawyers around the legality of them, but they're about present levels of performance. It is the most thoughtful, innovative prompt. To me, probably the writing in the prompt, which he did all in his head,
Right.
is is something that could be copyrighted. It's
Right.
such
The
a
prompt
novel.
itself is a page long.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in this case, they're saying no.
Okay, so even if you write the world's most detailed, sophisticated AI prompt, you still don't own the result.
Right. So they're saying no on the results. I'm wondering, like, what about the prompt? But carry on.
But I guess you do own the prompt. So, if you tell a musician, write me a love song in a major key, you don't get to claim credit for the song. And so the idea isn't enough. You need to be making the creative decisions in how it's executed.
All right. So where does AI fit in this creative process, right? The Copyright Office says that AI can be used like a paintbrush. This is interesting. Kind of used like a paintbrush or a camera or a synthesizer as long as the human is making key decisions. And to quote from the report, human authors are entitled to copyright in their creative modifications of AI-generated outputs. I like that. I think it's helpful to think about it as a paintbrush, a camera, a synthesizer, but the human is still more than just in the loop. They are really driving the creative process.
Right. So that means if a graphic designer generates AI art, but then reshapes it, recolors it, or integrates it into a larger work, they might own that final creation. So AI is fine as a tool, but if it takes over the creative decision-making, that's where copyright stops applying.
Okay, so the bottom line is that if you're using AI and you want to claim ownership of the work, you need to make sure that you are involved in significant creative choices. You modify, refine, or arrange AI-generated content, and you ensure that AI isn't making the expressive decisions. And I don't know if that's, honestly, schools and copyright offices, it's not a one-to-one comparison. Students are developing these key skills. We're really going to kind of look, if it's just a continuum, we're going to look for a little more human than the copyright office is, don't you think?
I think so, yeah. Schools aren't banning AI, but they are asking how much of this, whatever the student has turned in, is truly the student's thinking. And so that's the big takeaway, that AI can be a collaborator, a tool, a resource, but it can't replace the human's role in authorship.
Good. I hope that the shared Chat EDU audience feels the enthusiasm for the Copyright Office's ruling that we felt, because I think it does shed some light on this very interesting debate. Essentially all this comes down to, where is the line? There's all these traffic light systems that people are building, and then we have Leon Furz's AI assessment scale that we use in the micro-credential. Those are kind of the traffic light and Leon Furz's thing are a variation of the same idea, but they're all about where's the line? Where is, authentic student work? And as we get more sophisticated in our understanding of this technology, we're going to have to get more sophisticated in understanding the line, not just as teachers, but also parents. All right, but you texted me and said, what about, because in the micro-credential, we get lots of questions from folks about, well, this is copyright and intellectual property. The Copyright Office, generally is not dealing with trade secrets or, patents. This is mostly books, art, music, stuff like that, but super instructive for schools. But then we get a lot of questions about, what about the intellectual property that lives inside the large language models? And so they did nothing here, but they alluded to the third report.
Okay.
Okay, so not addressed in this report is the debate over copyrighted human works that are being pulled from the internet and other sources and ingested into the AI systems or models, often without permission. Often.
Yeah,
Often.
Often.
Unless they filed a lawsuit. Actually, there's a really great visual that I have. Maybe we'll drop it into just the video feed here of all the active lawsuits. We used it in our last Zoom meeting on the micro-credential. There's quite a few. It was hard to get on a single slide. So visual artists, authors, news organizations, and others have sued the AI companies, as we said, for copyright theft in cases that are still working through the U.S. courts. So the Copyright Office hasn't weighed in on those legal cases, but it says it's working on another report that will turn to the training of these models. So stand by for another fascinating Beneath the Surface on AI and copyright.
Interesting.
You on the edge of your seat?
I am. It is something that teachers are thinking so much about.
It is indeed. So Liz, last week for Short Stack Chatback, you gave us a great history lesson with the Luddites and Ned Ludd.
Yeah, so you want another one?
I do.
Okay, so this week I'm going to give you a little history of patents.
All right.
So President George Washington signed the very first patent in the United States. So the Patent Act was passed in 1790, and it was the first law in the United States to grant patents for inventions so that people could profit from their inventions and other people couldn't steal it and say, like, buy mine. So it protected new inventions and works. So the very first patent he signed was for potash, which is a key ingredient in fertilizer.
Wow. I tell you, for a math teacher, you're really killing it with this stuff. All right, so even though this copyright ruling didn't deal with patents, it does feel like General George Washington will be a fantastic chimer-inner for Short Stack Chatback this week.
Well, let's let him chime in.
Chime in.
Sir, the wisdom of the Copyright Office doth align with the natural order. For in all works of industry and invention, it is the labor of man that doth grant rightful claim. To permit the automaton, unthinking and unfeeling, to stand as author is to disregard the very principle upon which property is secured and industry encouraged. Let it be known, therefore, that while the machine may serve as instrument, the mind of man alone must govern its hand, lest we surrender our rights to specters of our own design.
Liz, you crushed it again.
I'm having fun with these history little tidbits.
Who knows what next week will bring?
I don't know.
Well, my friend, it's time to roll the credits.
As always, we'd love to hear what you think. So please let us know at chatedu@edadvance.org. That's EDADVANCE.org. And also rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you are using. Chat EDU is brought to you by EdAdvance, the nonprofit regional education service center in Litchfield, Connecticut. This episode of Chat EDU is sponsored by the National Center for Next Generation Manufacturing. Chat EDU is recorded, edited, and produced by Andre Angelo and Justin Pasco, whose dedication and expertise bring our discussions to life. Chat EDU's executive producer is the multi-talented rock star Cameron Audia. Additionally, we are grateful for the support of our colleague Gary Robinson, and we appreciate his time and talents. And of course, a big Chat EDU shout out to our fearless leader and executive director, Jonathan Costa, for inspiring the pod. And finally, a heartfelt thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey exploring the thoughtful and innovative integration of AI in education.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Costa, and I am the executive director at EdAdvance, and I want you to know how much we appreciate our listeners. If you enjoyed the podcast, feel free to explore EdAdvance's other AI services, which include customized professional learning of all kinds, conferences, and our micro-credential co-sponsored by the Southern Connecticut State University Office of Workforce and Lifelong Learning. Just visit skills21.org/AI to learn more. That's all for now, and thank you again for listening to Chat EDU.